Hi, everybody. It's Jim Siegel for Spaceflight Insider. Only 9 days after successfully launching a resupply mission to the International Space Station, SpaceX is scheduled to launch yet another Falcon 9 rocket, also from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, Space Launch Complex 40. And the mission is called AMOS-17 or AMOS-17. It's a communications satellite rather than a mission to the International Space Station, is scheduled to be launched on August 3rd at 6:51 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That is, the window is going to open at that time. It's an 85-minute launch window, again opening at 6:51 p.m. SpaceX will use a first stage booster that's already been flight proven. It's flown two previous times, one in July of 2018 and again in November of 2018. And you can see on this picture the scorched skin on this particular booster, and compare that with the rather clean second stage booster, which is above it. SpaceX's customer for this mission is called Spacecom. It's an Israeli satellite operator and satellite service provider serving Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. Does the title AMOS-17 get its title from being the 17th satellite by this company? Well, you might think so, but that's not the case. The 17 comes from its intended location, 17 degrees east longitude over the equator, in geostationary orbit 22,500 miles above the Earth. Now, keep in mind, that's 10 times farther than the altitude of the International Space Station. AMOS-17 will join three other AMOS satellites in the Spacecom fleet, and AMOS-17 will also be joining about 450 other satellites. That's according to the website Satellite Signals. These 450 orbiting above the equator at that same unique altitude of 22,500 miles. And that altitude permits the satellites to orbit at the same relative angular speed as the Earth, thus allowing them to stay relatively stationary above one spot on the Earth. So AMOS-17 will be parked at 17 degrees east longitude, as I mentioned. That's above the Republic of Congo, and on this map, that would be just above the F of the word of. There's two other interesting aspects of this mission. First, SpaceX will not attempt to retrieve the first stage booster as it usually does. Why? To enable all of the fuel aboard the first stage to as high into orbit as possible before the satellite has to rely on getting the rest of the way to that 22,500 mile altitude on its own, based on its own internal fuel. Secondly, an interesting aspect here is that this flight actually goes back to a prior satellite, AMOS-6. Nearly 3 years ago, it was rolled out atop a Falcon 9 rocket for a static fire test a couple of days before the scheduled launch. Regretfully, the test didn't go well. An explosion destroyed the satellite, the rocket, and much of the launch complex. So Spacecom is getting a quote-unquote free launch of AMOS-17 in compensation for the loss of AMOS-6. So our intrepid photographers, Scott Schilke, Mike Howard, and Graham Smith, will join me out at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station for that early evening launch. Again, that's 6:51 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time is when the launch window opens on August 3rd. Meanwhile, our tireless writers will be standing by to bring you all the details of that launch. So be sure to Tune in to spaceflightinsider.com for the inside line on this and all other things space. So, for my Spaceflight Insider colleagues, this is Jim Siegel signing off for now. So long.